In our last talk, we explored the possibility that reality itself may be inverted. That what we usually place at the center may not belong there at all. This talk turns that same lens inward, because once we begin to question reality, the next question becomes impossible to avoid. Who is the me experiencing it? Most of us spend our lives assuming the self is obvious, something solid, something permanent, something we've always been. But what if the self isn't who we are at all? What if it's something the mind gradually constructs and then quietly asks us to defend? Imagine living behind a window you never knew existed, a window so familiar you never once thought to question it. Yet everything you experience passes through that glass. What you notice, what you believe, even the person you think you are. And the moment you recognize the window, your whole relationship with reality begins to change. That window is the mind. We often think of free will as making choices. Yes or no, right or wrong, success or failure. But I believe free will runs much deeper than that. Free will is the moment consciousness chooses how it will express itself through us. To understand that, we have to return to the beginning. When we're very young, the mind has not yet built a strong identity. Children don't spend their lives defending themselves. They aren't trying to become someone. They simply experience life directly, present, open, immediate. But as intelligence develops, the mind slowly begins to tell a story. It compares, it remembers, it imagines, it worries, it hopes. And almost without noticing, the simple experience of being becomes the experience of being someone. The filter gradually forms, the story grows richer, and eventually the story begins to feel more real than the awareness behind it. That is the birth of the psychological self. For a time, that self serves an important purpose. It helps us function. It helps us survive. It helps us find our place in the world. We build careers, relationships, families, reputations. We spend years strengthening the identity we've created. And for a while, it works. Until life begins asking deeper questions. Because happiness, however beautiful, depends on circumstances. It depends upon the world behaving the way we hope it will. And sooner or later, life reminds us that it really does. Yet beneath all of that activity, something remains unchanged. Quiet, steady, patient. The awareness that has been present through every stage of our lives. As life unfolds, the filter begins to fall. Not all at once, but gradually, almost imperceptibly. The self no longer feels quite so solid. The stories lose some of their authority. And that is often when the ego becomes louder, not because it is our enemy, but because it is trying to protect the identity the mind has spent a lifetime building. The ego is not the problem. It is simply the mind trying to preserve a version of ourselves that may no longer reflect who we are becoming. And it is here, in this quiet tension between holding on and letting go, that free will truly begins. Every moment of our lives quietly asks the same questions. What will shape this moment? The self or selflessness? This, I believe, is the deeper meaning of free will. Not simply choosing what we do, but choosing what expresses itself through us. One path gradually strengthens the self. The other slowly loosens it. One contracts absolute consciousness. The other allows absolute consciousness to expand. This isn't about becoming morally better or spiritually superior. It's about recognizing that every choice leaves a subtle imprint on consciousness itself. The human spirit is where free will operates. It carries both the privilege and the responsibility of choice. Absolute consciousness quietly expands through those choices. And as it expands, it increasingly is ignited by divine intelligence, appearing within life as intuition. Every moment of genuine presence, every act of compassion, every movement towards selflessness widens something within us. Every moment of fear, attachment, or self-centeredness narrows that experience, not permanently, but perceptually. The light has never disappeared. It has always been there. It is simply seen more clearly as the filter continues to fall. That is why this journey can feel so difficult. As the filter continues to fall, the ego often becomes louder. It reaches for old identities, old stories, old certainties, not because it is trying to harm us, but because it is trying to protect the only version of ourselves it has ever known. Seen this way, the ego deserves understanding rather than hostility. It is simply doing the job it was designed to do. But there becomes a moment, perhaps many moments, when we no longer have to believe every story it tells. We begin to notice a space between awareness and thought, a pause between impulse and response. And within that pause, free will reveals itself. Every time we choose presence over reaction, understanding over judgment, connection over separation, something quietly changes. Not outside of us, within us. Self becomes a little less central. Absolute consciousness quietly expands. And peace begins to rise. Not because the world has changed, but because the one experiencing the world has changed. This, I believe, is why the physical world exists. Not as a punishment, not as a test, and not as something to escape, but as the place where consciousness learns through experience, where every ordinary moment becomes an opportunity to remember what we already are. Perhaps that is the real purpose of free will, not to shape the world around us, but to shape the way consciousness expresses itself within it. When we look back across a human life, the pattern begins to emerge. We begin with instinct. We grow into intelligence. And if awareness continues to deepen, we slowly awaken into intuition. Not by becoming someone new, but by remembering what the mind gradually forgot. And perhaps the greatest aversion of all is this: We spend much of our lives trying to become more successful, more knowledgeable, more important. Yet consciousness seems to move in the opposite direction, towards simplicity, towards presence, towards selflessness, towards peace. We are not here to become more. We are here to stop becoming less than what we have always been. And perhaps every moment of awareness returns us to the same quiet truth. The world does not decide the direction of consciousness. That choice has always been placed gently in our own hands. Because free will is not the power to shape the world. It is the power to shape the one who is experiencing it.